Yeah.
All right,
I don't know what
let's get
percentage you
started.
have.
Yeah.
We are on Daniel chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. Chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. So, somebody please read that for us.
Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint.
We can hear you down here.
Oh, sorry. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgressions of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
All right, so here we see that an angel requires about the length of the little horn's activity, and this little horn is not the same little horn as in Daniel 7, which is the Antichrist, which comes from the fourth beast, that is the Roman Empire, but this horn comes from the Greek Empire, and it is Antiochus Epiphanes IV, right, of the Seleucid Empire, who is merciless and rains down such destruction upon the people of Israel during that time until Judas Maccabeus comes and delivers the children of Israel, establishes an independent kingdom for about 80 years until the Romans come and take over when Pompey basically comes and takes over. So this is going to take place over a period of time of 2,300 days. What does this mean? Is this symbolic? Well, there's problems with that because none of the other numbers have been symbolic regarding the beasts, right? The two horns have stood for two kingdoms, Media and Persia. Of the goat, the four kings who succeeded Alexander, and the one being Alexander himself, right? So, and the specification of evening and morning is very different as well, okay? So, what is going on here? What do these days represent? So, 2,300, right, is, we see that it's evening and morning. There were two daily sacrifices done in the temple. There's the morning sacrifice and the evening sacrifice. Okay, this would take place over 1,150 days. Okay, now, 1 Maccabees 154 states that Antiochus desecrated the altar of the temple on the 15th of Kislev, December 6, 167 BC. 1 Maccabees 4:52 through 53 says that Judas Maccabeus and his companions were able to offer sacrifices on December 14th, 164. So, from that time that the temple altar was desecrated to its rededication was 1,106 days. Okay? Does that, this falls slightly short of the 1,150 days, right? So people, are, so the critical scholars are going to say, well, obviously this came later, and they tried, but they couldn't count, so they got the days wrong, right? Now, there's one way to get around this. 1 Maccabees 1:41 through 53 says that Antiochus's order banning sacrifices to Israel's God was enforced before the desecration. So if they had been stopped 44 days earlier, then the prediction would be exact. Also, remember that Old Testament prophecies are usually given in round numbers. Abraham was told that his descendants would live in Egypt for 400 years. How long did they actually live in Egypt? 430 years. Okay? In the same way, Jeremiah prophesied that the captivity would last 70 years. However, it lasts 68 years, right? So Old Testament prophecies are usually given in round numbers, right? So, prophecy also is intended to demonstrate God's governance of history. It's not to promote a shallow, a deterministic understanding of God's accounting of time, right? So, here we see that Antiochus stops the sacrifices for approximately 1,150 days. Okay? And this is where we get the festival of dreidel, 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 you made me out of clay.
I know, Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
I knew the answer.
Okay.
Answer.
Why not?
Because he's not
He's a
Jewish.
thorn. He's a thorn today.
I was a rose and now I'm a thorn.
Right.
No, you'd still.
Hanukkah, the festival of lights. It's the only Jewish holiday that is not given by God, right? It comes from this time period. It comes from the time period when Antiochus had desecrated the temple and Judas Maccabeus fought to free Israel from the clutches of this godless tyrant. And Hanukkah means dedication, right? And it was even celebrated by Jesus, right, in John chapter 10. So, it's kind of an important holiday, right? So, now, it's interesting because Seventh-day Adventists take these 2,300 evenings and mornings. They take them as years, for what each year is one day. And he based his theology on Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34. This was William Miller. And so, 2,300 years from 457 BC would be 1844. Did Jesus come back in 1844? No. This was known as the Great Disappointment. Right? So, those who remained in the Millerite movement reinterpreted this disappointment in various ways. One of these led to the founding of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, which still defends this questionable hermeneutic of equating a day with a year. So, these people are still out there teaching false things. So, there you go. Any questions?
Hanukkah seems like it's a Jewish people's big holiday. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like that's the one you hear about all the time, but yet it wasn't a holiday given to them by God.
Right. Yeah, Hanukkah, Keith was saying, if you didn't hear, Hanukkah seems like their big holiday, but it wasn't given to them by God, right? It's not actually in the Old Testament, right? So why do you think that is? Where does Hanukkah usually fall?
Right around Christmas, because they don't believe in Jesus.
Right, and where do most Jews live? New York City, right? Right? Christian countries, right? And so, of course, they're going to
Celebrate something from their religion.
right, because they're going to have that day off, right? So as with the secularization of society, there are still these, there are still some religious holdovers, right? Christmas is still a day off, even though most people don't believe it, or go to it, or go to church, or anything like that, right? And so, of course, the Jews are going to celebrate something where they get a day off.
They celebrate all week.
Yeah, they celebrate for 7 days, because that's the,
They want 7 days off.
I don't think they get 7 days off, but
They have 8 nights, right?
yeah, because they have 8 nights of Hanukkah because the oil was only supposed to last for a few days, but the oil miraculously lasted the whole rededication. So, all right. Gabriel explains the vision of the ram and the goat. 15, let's read 15 and 16.
While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision.
Okay, so, as we said before, visions are not very understandable, right? They have to be interpreted, right? And so, what is the human voice that Daniel hears? No, it wasn't right? He's telling the angel Gabriel.
Oh.
So who commands angels? God, right? God uses a human voice, and we see this most clearly in the person of Jesus Christ, right? Now, what does Gabriel mean?
Man of God.
It can mean man of God, right? Geber means man, but there's a little more nuance to it. Geber is usually used of a strong man, someone who defends, who fights for those who cannot defend themselves. It's usually used in contrast to women and children who cannot defend themselves. So an even better translation might be a warrior, right? A strong man, right? The strong man of God, the warrior of God. Now, how do most people usually portray angels?
He's,
Say that again?
White with wings.
White and with wings, right?
Halo.
The halo. Sometimes a
they're
sword.
not weak. I mean, they look,
They look feminine,
yeah, they're not
right?
strong.
Like your little precious moments things, right? Where they all look like fat little children, right? Is that the way the Bible? I mean, if we're going back to, if we're Lutherans and we're like, we go with what the Bible teaches, how does the Bible usually show angels?
Scares people.
Right. People are freaked out, right? They're usually shown as men or like incredibly scary creatures, right? They cause people to faint, right? We'll see that in the next verse, right? So that's the thing. I mean, angels are always saying what?
It's like a future prophecy.
Fear not.
Right, that's how they begin like every proclamation, right? Don't freak out, right? I'm not here to smite you, right? Why? Because the sinner recognizes holiness and is afraid of it. Why? Because what happens when the holy and the unholy get together? Yes. It's like, crossing the streams. Right?
Usually like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right, Sodom and Gomorrah. Uzziah, when he touches the ark, right? When they take the ark to the Philistine cities, and what happens? Well, they don't all die, but they all get tumors, right? They all get tumors. And their statues fall down, right? And the like. So, so that's what happens when you see angels, right? When the holy and the unholy get together. Which is why we need the forgiveness of sins, because that's the only thing that makes unholy things holy, right? So let's read 17 and 18.
So he came near where I stood, and when he came I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright.
Okay, so what happens? What happens to Daniel? What does that sound like? Hey, fainted, right? Because it's so terrifying, right? He faints. And yet, Gabriel here is sent to tell him about the end. That these things are leading up to the end of all things, right? This is what Hebrews 1 says. we are living in the last days now, right? In many and various ways, God spoke to his people of old by the prophets, but now in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. The same way with Pentecost, right? In these last days, I will pour out my Spirit upon all people, right? We are living in the last days now. We've been living in the last days for 2,000 years, right? All of the prophecies have either come to pass or are in the process of being fulfilled. So we can expect Jesus at any time.
So do you personally feel we're in the last days?
Yeah.
Well, you know what I
is
mean, a
last
little bit.
No one knows the day or the hour.
It's amazing though, a lot of people try to tell you when it is already.
Yeah, exactly. All of these predictions on when the last day is going to be, and I mean, we had that here not too long ago. What was that, a few years ago again? I mean, it's just, and what it does is, that stuff is wicked. It's wicked because it not only calls Jesus a liar, because Jesus said, no one knows when the day or the hour is, but what happens when it doesn't come true?
People just won't believe it anymore.
Right. People are like, well, this is all bunk. I'm going to go believe something else. Right? So it actually is a scandal. It's a scandal to those pious people who have been misled into this, And just think, these people, they'd sell everything they had. Right? They'd sell everything they had and then go wait out in a field for Jesus to come back. And guess what? Jesus didn't come back. And then guess what? You don't have anything. And you were misled by your teachers. Right?
It's just like Charlie Brown waiting for the great pumpkin. I mean, it's about the same thing,
At least those people
Yeah,
still.
poor old Linus.
Yeah.
He believes so hard.
At least those people still had their lives. Others drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Right.
That was all we had.
Right. I mean, we forget about the power of false doctrine in our lives, right? These lies, words hurt. Words kill. Okay? We've seen that. We've seen that in the experiences of Jim Jones. We've seen it with the Millerite movement, where people go and sell everything, or the Heaven's Gate, right? It not only kills the soul, but it can also kill the body too, right? So that's why words actually are important, right? Especially words about God, right? They're not just dead words, because belief and false belief actually does kill. Because it doesn't just kill for this life, but it kills for eternity, right? All right, 19 through 22, here we see the interpretation of the beasts, those two beasts. And he said, "Behold, I am about to make known to you what will happen in the latter part of the indignant anger." And the indignant anger here is God's wrath, okay? Because it concerns the appointed time of the end. The ram that you saw had two horns, the kings of Media and Persia. Okay? The male goat is the king of Greece, Alexander the Great, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king, the one that was broken and four arose in its place. Right? That's when his empire ended, when he died, and his four generals split up the empire. Okay? 4 kingdoms from his nation will arise, but not with his same strength. Right? They were never nearly as powerful as what he was. So, that is the interpretation of the two beasts. And then 23 through 26 has to do with the little horn, with Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. Remember, Epiphanes means manifest. He basically claimed to be God. Okay? That's what he had printed on all of his money. So rather than "in God we trust," it'd be "in me we trust," right? In the latter part of their kingdom, that is in the Seleucid kingdom, when the transgressors are completed, right? There were actually a group of Jews, and their descendants are the Sadducees, who sought to make a syncretistic religion. They tried to take Judaism and Greek philosophy and stick them together and make a new religion. They actually created a gymnasium in Jerusalem, and they would not follow the Mosaic law, okay? And this really influenced the priests, okay? Because that's who the Sadducees were, right? They were the priests, and they didn't even believe in the resurrection, right? So, those are their descendants, right? These are the transgressors whom Daniel is talking about. Those who want Greek religion and not the religion of Moses, right? There will arise a merciless king who understands enigmas. Okay? Antiochus was a merciless king, right? He got to the throne by bribing and flattering and dethroning his nephew. Okay? He understands enigmas. He was crafty, just like the serpent in the garden. Okay? In fact, he sent messengers to Jerusalem and talked to them about peace. And then when they had their guard down, he sent his army in and killed them. Okay? He was crafty. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. Okay? So, he has great power and authority, but this is not Antiochus, right? Nobody has power of their own. His power is always circumscribed by God. Okay? God is still in control. He will destroy wonderful things, and he will succeed in doing this. So he desecrates the temple, he throws out the altar, the showbread, all of the stuff that they need for the sacrifices. He erects a statue to Zeus, and he sacrifices pigs in the temple. Okay? He will destroy mighty men and the people of the saints. So they would make 80-year-old priests eat pig flesh. They would kill sons of a mother before, right in front of her eyes, because they wouldn't break the Mosaic law, and then finally kill the mom. Okay? Through his cunning, he will both cause deception to succeed by his power and magnify himself in his heart. He will destroy many who are at ease, and he will arise against the prince of princes. So Antiochus goes to war not just with the people of Israel, but with God himself, right? That's the whole point, is he's burning the Bible. He's stopping the sacrifices, right? He's persecuting God's people. And when you do that, you persecute God, right? Isn't that what Jesus says to Saul on the road, right? Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me, right? However, he will be broken, but not by human power, right? Antiochus dies, and it looks like he was killed by natural means. Nobody assassinated him or anything like that, right? God is the one who ended his life. Okay? The vision of the evenings and the mornings that was spoken is true, but you close up the vision because it concerns many days in the future. And I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up and did the king's business. I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. So, here we see after all of this, Daniel is sick. Why would he be sick?
He was overcome with all the information he was given.
Right, because he sees the future persecution of his people, right? And we see that here, and he's an old man too, right? I mean, he's probably in his early to mid 80s, right? He's been doing the king's business for a long time, right? And this is a lot of stress and a lot of heartache. And he doesn't always understand what is going on, right? It's hard to understand the future, right? See, we can look back and we can tie this to particular days, particular people, right? We can look back and this is clear as day. However, think about it. He's prophesying 300 years in the future, right? And hindsight is always 20/20. So, all right. So, any questions? All right. Well,
I've got a question on what Pastor Saunders